Ready? The South Dakota Senate will come to order. Thank you for your patience. I'll go ahead and introduce the chaplain of the day and the pages of the day, or the page of the day. Today leading us in prayer is Pastor Josh Bauman of Faith Lutheran Church here in Pierre. And our page of the day leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance following the prayer is Kylan Olson of Waubay.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I pray. Almighty and eternal God, thank you for the Senate body, the president of this body, and all who gather here this day in service to the people of South Dakota. I ask that you grant these members of Senate your counsel and guidance. Guide our governor, our attorney general, Congress, and the president in their leadership. I lift up the United States military men and women stationed here and around the world. Please shield them from all harm and evil. As our country grieves another national tragedy yesterday in Florida, where 17 innocent lives were taken, direct hearts to healing, love, and Lord, even forgiveness. Pave a pathway to peace. May it be our collective aim that each one reach one, so that those in need of help may find it in us. Direct and govern our days so that we may serve you and one another. Bless our fourth grade class from DeSmit today and those in our gallery. Grant our pages and those who travel safety. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland, Kamak, Cronin, Curd, Ewing, Frerichs, Greenfield, Haverly, Heiner, Jensen, Kennedy, Killer, Klum, Colbeck, Langer, Mahar, Monroe, Nelson, Neseba, Netherton, Northstrup, Otten, Partridge, Peters, Rush, Russell, Soholt, Solano, Stalzer, Sutton, Tapio, Tiedemann, White, Wick, and Youngberg. We have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'll begin with some announcements. Is our doctor of the day here? Way in back. I would like to direct everybody's attention to the far back of the gallery. Tony Elberg of Winner is our Doctor of the Day. The Doctor of the Day program is sponsored by the South Dakota State Medical Association. Today's Doctor of the Day is Tony Berg of Winner. Berg serves the health needs of the community at Horizon Healthcare Incorporated, Mission Community Health Center. Prior to entering medical school, Dr. Berg served an 8-month tour in Vietnam as a first lieutenant armored cavalry platoon leader of the Army and was released from service upon his return to the States. Dr. Berg received his bachelor's degree in zoology from South Dakota State University in 1970, and following 2 years at the University of South Dakota School of Medicine, he received his medical degree from the University of Alabama with a specialty in family practice. Dr. Berg is a past president of the South Dakota State Medical Association and a member of the American Medical Association. Please welcome Dr. Berg. Thank you, sir. On behalf of Senator Sutton and the rest of the body, I would note that today is AgTegra Day at the Capitol. AgTegra Cooperative is a locally owned agricultural cooperative with over 6,700 member owners, 900 employees, and 50 locations throughout South Dakota. It's headquartered in Aberdeen, and AgTegra serves the needs of its member owners by providing aerial, agronomy, grain, fuel, feed, and precision agriculture goods and services. Joining us in the gallery today are current directors, member owners, and employees. We'd like to welcome them and thank them for lunch today. If you would please stand, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Are you young folks up here from DeSmit? It's a good-looking group of people up there. And on behalf of Senator White, who is your current senator, I was for a while, but that was when you were in diapers, we'd like to welcome you. Tammy Albright and Sven, okay, are also with them. Mrs. Albright is one teacher and Mrs. Swen is the other teacher. So with that, would you please rise so that we can welcome you to your capital? The Schmidt fourth graders. Senator Netherton,
Personal privilege.
granted.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. My very favorite person in the whole wide world is here visiting today, the man I am honored to call my husband, Mike Netherton.
Welcome, Mr. Netherton. Are there other personal privileges at this point? I would note that we've made the executive order to allow any pages who are concerned about traveling conditions to take off. I don't know if you've all been informed of that, but if you do have some concerns, if you've been in touch with your parents and they say you need to get on the road, you folks can feel free to do so. I assume that some people will be left behind and we can muddle through, but we are going to recognize you and honor you before we get to that point. Item of business number 3, approval of the journal.
Mr. President, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Secretary of the Senate has had under consideration the Senate Journal of the 23rd day. All errors, typographical or otherwise, are duly marked in the temporary journal for correction, and we hereby move the adoption of the report.
Is there a second?
Senator Greenfield, Chair.
All those in favor of adoption of the journal will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That motion is passed. Communication and petitions.
I have a letter of appointment from the governor, and he says, I have the honor to inform you that I have reappointed Stanley Porch, Jackson County, Wanblee, South Dakota, to the South Dakota Ellsworth Development Authority. Sincerely, Dennis Stugard, Governor.
The governor's reappointment of Stanley Porch to the South Dakota Ellsworth Development Authority was referred to the Committee on State Affairs.
And Mr. President, I have the honor to inform you that on February 14th, I approved Senate Bills 30, 35, 36, 37, 38, 49, and 71, and the same have been deposited in the office of the Secretary of State. Respectfully, Dennis Stugard, Governor.
Reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 60 and has deferred it to the 41st Legislative Day. Senator Boland, Chair. Committee on Military and Veterans Affairs has had under consideration SCR 15 and Senate Bill 97, recommending due pass. House Bill 1244 recommends due pass to be placed on the consent calendar and recommends tabling Senate Bill 181. Senator Partridge, Chair. The Committee on Senate Appropriations recommends tabling Senate Bills 150, 168, and 215. Senator Tiedemann, Chair. The Committee on Commerce and Energy has had under consideration Senate Bill 178 and House Bill 1031, recommends due pass, and House Bill 1032 and 1050, recommending due pass to be placed on the consent calendar, and recommends deferring House Bill 1051 to the 41st Legislative Day, and returns House Bill 1029 without recommendation. Senator Jensen, Chair. And the Committee on Ag and Natural Resources has had under consideration House Bill 1219, recommending due pass, recommends deferring Senate Bill 188 to the 41st Legislative Day, and recommends tabling Senate Bill 205. Senator Kamak, Chair. And the Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bills 1096, Senate Bill 182 and 191, recommends due pass, and House Bills 1017, 1052, 1084, 1085, 1095, 1097, 1100, 1112, and 1249 recommends do pass for these bills to be placed on the consent calendar, and recommends do pass amended for House Bill 1077 and SCR 16, and then recommends deferring Senate Bill 175 to the 41st legislative day. Senator Russell, Chair.
Messages.
This is a message from the House. I have the honor to inform the honorable body that the House has failed to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1016 and has appointed Representative John, Stevens, and Ring as a committee of three on the part of the House to meet with the like committee on the part of the Senate to adjust the differences between the two houses. And I have the honor to transmit House Bills 1007, 1106, 1109, 1111, 1114, 1140, 1146, 1161, 1163, 1166, 1168, 1169, 1183, 1216, 1230, 1248, 1255, 1268, 1270, 1271, 1277, and 1278, which have passed the House, and your favorable consideration is requested. Sandra J. Zinter, Chief Clerk. If I wasn't so old, I'd go to auctioneering school.
Sure. It was mentioned that the House had failed to concur in the wise Senate amendments to House Bill 1016, and they've asked us to appoint a conference committee. Members of our conference committee will be Senators Bolin, Netherton, and Nessebar. Motions and resolutions.
Senator Peters moves that Senate Page Resolution Number 3 be adopted.
Comments on that motion, Senator Peters.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Well, just to give a brief thank you to the Pages and all of the work that you all have done over the last couple of weeks in helping us out. We've really had a pleasure getting to know you. I knew two of you, actually 3 or 4 of you from the years that you've all spent up here. Got to know the rest of you a little bit better. It's been fun having you guys in committee telling us about your future life plans and where you're going to go to college or what you're going to do after school and the different ways that you're going to serve society after this this endeavor. So I'm going to stand down and be brief because I want you guys to start getting on the road. But I do truly, from the bottom of my heart, and I know the Senate would agree with me, that we appreciate everything that you guys have done for us over the last couple of weeks, even if it is just grabbing us a cup of coffee. It really does help move the process along. It helps make the system work, and we appreciate your service and time away from your school and your family. So thank you very much for your sacrifice and helping us out. Thank you.
Senator Frerichs.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, it's a little bit tough to follow the remarks of one of the mothers of the Pages, who we're very proud of. But, I just want to say 15 years ago, I was over on the House side, but that's when I had the privilege to serve. And I know there's other of us that served as Pages, but it's very important that you're here. So thank you. And I also know of the 4 Pages that I sponsor, 2 of you are the second generation that I've had the chance to sponsor and have you come join us. So thank you for all of that. Please put us to work in the future so that we can help you continue to be very successful. Mr. President, thank you very much.
Senator Frerichs, have you really been around that long that you sponsored their parents?
I should say second sibling. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will read as the Pages gather together and are given their certificates and people are taking pictures. I will read Senate Page Resolution 3, a resolution expressing the appreciation and gratitude of the Senate of the 93rd Legislature of the State of South Dakota to Tyler Arend, Allison Dury, Madison Hetland, Tabitha Jensen, Grace Jones, Kylan Olson, Braden Peters, Derek Peters, Carly Schoeneman, Talisa Smith, Grace Weinheimer, and Autumn Weisler. Whereas the above, it's getting raucous. Whereas the above named named served loyally as pages for the Senate of the 93rd Legislative Session, and whereas the members of the 93rd Senate expressed their most sincere appreciation to these young people for their service to the state, and whereas the members extend to these young people their wishes for every success in life, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 93rd Legislature of the state of South Dakota that a personal copy of this resolution be duly certified and furnished to each page on this last day of service. The question before the body is final consideration of Senate Page Resolution 3. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no, and the Secretary will call the roll. Now the official part. We're going to vote on that resolution that I
almost
just read.
forgot. Senator Bolin? Yes. Kamak? Kamak? Aye. Cronin? Aye. Kurd? Ewing? He's gone. Frerichs? Aye. Greenfield? Aye. Haverly? Aye. Heinert? Aye. Jensen? Gone. Kennedy? Aye. Killer? Gone. Plum? Aye. Colbeck? Aye. Langer? Mahar? Aye. Monroe? Aye. Nelson? Nelson? Aye. Nesseba? Aye. Netherton? Aye. Northrup? Aye. Otten? Aye. Partridge? Aye. Peters? Aye. Rush? Russell? Aye. Soholt? Gone. Solano? Aye. Stalzer? Aye. Sutton? Aye. Tapio? Aye. Tiedemann? Aye. White? Aye. Wick? Aye. Youngberg? Aye. Okay, Mr. President, there are 29 yeas and 6 excused.
Thank you. Senate Page Resolution 3, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is declared passed. Please stand and thank them for their services.
She can throw it away if she doesn't. Okay. I'll just wait a little bit till these. Sure.
All right, pages, if you are hitting the road, hit the road, and if not, get back to work. Thank you again for your service.
Okay, Senator Wick moves that SR2 be referred to the Committee on Ag and Natural Resources.
Been moved and seconded that Senate Resolution 2 be referred to the Committee on Ag and Natural Resources. Comments on that motion? Senator Wick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I was doing my homework last night because I like to read anything before I vote on it. And I printed this out because there's some areas of this that I think, whereas we all agree that private property protections of South Dakota farmers and ranchers should be affirmed, I do believe there are a few areas of this that deserve some further scrutiny, and I would like to see a committee take a deeper look into this and ask some questions of the sponsors. So I would move that at this time.
And you have done so. Further remarks? Senator Nelson.
Sure. Can I ask some questions?
Keep in mind that we're only dealing with the motion to send it to a committee, but state your first question and we'll see where we go from there.
What don't you like about this resolution? What's the problem?
We will, if you would care to try, again, without speaking to the merits of the language, but you alluded to trying to work on some of the language.
There is some language I feel might be a little bit strong, considering that there are some places, nobody enjoys an eminent domain request, but there are some places that would not have electricity without one, and I do believe it should be treated fairly to everyone. So I would like some questions asked in a committee.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, folks, a committee has looked at this very thoroughly. Matter of fact, several committees have looked at this very thoroughly, and it's been affirmed almost verbatim. There's just a very little portion of this that had some artistic liberties. But if you're offended or you don't like this, I could understand my Democratic colleagues not liking this, but it's almost verbatim taken from the Republican Party platform and a bill that is affirmed in there that Republicans in Congress have brought. So I guess I'm concerned that we're now trying to kill a good Republican issue, and I guess it's already been brought to a committee. Most of this was in the Republican National Party platform, and as well as the South Dakota state platform. So if you don't like those platforms, I'd have to suggest, sir, you're probably in the wrong party.
Let's refrain from making attacks such as the one that was just levied. The question before the body is whether or not to refer Senate Resolution 2 to Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Further remarks? Hearing none. This is a voice vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That motion has passed.
Senator Nelson moves that the Senate do concur in House amendments to SCR 3.
The motion again is Senator Nelson's motion that the changes made to SCR 3 be concurred in. Senator Nelson, would you care to speak to your motion?
Thank you, sir. It didn't change the intent of the resolution, and I stand behind it. And this was passed out of here unanimously. Well, assuming not unanimously, some of my Democratic colleagues didn't care for it, but go ahead and pass it. It's good resolution.
Further remarks? Further remarks? Hearing none. The question before the body is whether or not to concur in House amendments to Senate Concurrent Resolution 3. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no, and the Secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Frerichs. Yeah. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. No. Jensen. Kennedy. No. Klum. Aye. Kolbeck. Aye. Langer. Excused. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Aye. Nesseba. No. Netherton. Aye. Northstrop. Aye. Otten. Aye. Partridge. Aye. Peters. Aye. Rush. Russell. Aye. Soholt. Solano. Aye. Stalzer. Aye. Sutton. Aye. Tapio. Aye. Tiedemann. Aye. White. Aye. Wick. Aye. Youngberg. Aye. Frerichs. Mr. President, there are 27 yeas, 2 nays, and 6 excused.
So the motion, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is declared passed, and the House amendments to SCR 3 are hereby agreed to.
House Concurrent Resolution 1001, A concurrent resolution calling for statewide recognition of the migration of many young people from our state and urging state and local officials to take steps to counter that action and attract new residents to our state. Senator Boland moves that HCR 1001, as found on page 109 of the House Journal, be concurred in as amended.
Is there a second? We're a little slow on that one. Senator Boland, would you care to speak to your motion, sir?
Yes. First thing I'd like to do is I would like to recognize that the good senator from District 17, who is not here at the present time, is the prime sponsor on this. He has left a little bit early. It's kind of fallen to me. This resolution, I should say, did come through our committee. I worked well with the House prime sponsor, Representative Rasmussen. This is a product of a, you might say, a group of students who were at the University of South Dakota. I'm speaking now secondhand from both Senator Rush and the good Representative Rasmussen in this regard. They came up with some ideas. They approached these two individuals, Representative Rasmussen, Representative Rush. They wanted to talk about this concept of a brain drain. We defined that on lines 4 and 5. It talks about the number of students that might perhaps leave, how oftentimes at a young age, but between the ages of 30 and 49, many of these young people would like to come back to relocate with their families to smaller, more rural communities. And in conclusion, this resolution urges the Governor's Office of Economic Development and other local developmental entities to use social media outreach campaigns to work toward building the educated workforce and increasing business and other economic development opportunities in the state. It's again, this is not my resolution. I did not prime it in the Senate here, but I do think it is a reasonable resolution that we could pass. It has passed the Senate. It was revised slightly in the Senate here. I worked with the sponsor from the House to accomplish that. Passed out of our committee with only one dissenting vote. That individual is not here at the present time. So I'd urge your support of House Concurrent Resolution 1001, a statement coming originally from students at USD working in conjunction with their elected legislators to bring this issue to the fore. Thank you very much. I urge your favorable support.
Further remarks on House Concurrent Resolution 1001. Senator Nessebar, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. President. I stand in opposition to HCR 1001. I do believe it starts well-intended and has a noble aim. There are a significant number of college students leaving the state, and I talk to them in my classroom often. And I talk to them when they come back for homecoming, and they tell me why they're living somewhere else. And so I believe the resolution is correct when it says there is a lack of economic opportunities for young college graduates in South Dakota. But let's look at what this resolution does. The resolution directs the Governor's Office and other economic development entities to use social media campaigns directed at 30 to 49-year-olds to solve the brain drain. I take issue with this as a solution. First, targeting 30 to 49-year-olds will not prevent young graduates from leaving the state. HCR 1001 aims to solve a young people's problem with a social media campaign aimed at people who are unlikely to identify with new college graduates. Further, HCR 1001 proposes that bringing 30 to 49-year-olds to South Dakota will bring economic prosperity to the state and all its residents. But new residents don't create economic opportunity in a vacuum, right? New residents create opportunity when they can find affordable housing, when they can find a good job that supports a family, when we recognize opportunities for their children and they contribute to the economy. HCR 1001 doesn't address the lack of affordable housing or jobs or lack of economic opportunities for young people in South Dakota. I would argue the solution is flawed. It does nothing to address the root causes of why young people leave here in the first place. This is a Band-Aid solution to an arterial bleed that I think needs a far stronger response. Part of that response could be more focused investments in South Dakota. We do invest in need-based scholarships. South Dakota's contribution compared to neighboring states is an embarrassment. Right now in South Dakota, we give $11.85 for each of our students who qualify for a federal Pell Grant. We're competing against states like Minnesota that gives $1,600 and Wyoming that gives $2,200 versus our $11.85. We need to invest in early childhood education. New families want to be able to have and count on that early childhood education as part of their development for their children and for their families. But we're one of 7 states that doesn't spend any state money on a pre-K system. We need to invest in our technical education. We know this is a problem, and we also know that our tuition in South Dakota for our tech schools is twice as expensive as it is in Nebraska and Wyoming. And so many of our young people are going across the border and taking advantage of those same educational opportunities. Those are the kinds of things that we need to change. Finally, the other thing we need to do, and we do this often on this Senate body and sometimes in legislation, is that we engage in needlessly divisive language and policy proposals that are aimed at citizens or soon-to-be citizens that happen to be Muslim, that happen to be immigrants, and we can do better than that. And so I would urge you for us all to work together on these things that we agree on, to try and build an economic system, an economic structure that works for everybody in South Dakota. And I'd urge your opposition to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Further remarks? Senator Northrup, good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I was sitting here, I remember within the last few years, I was sitting at a Board of Regents meeting, looking through their pamphlet that they create every year. And one of the things the Board of Regents bragged to the legislators at that meeting was that more young people, more educated young people were moving to South Dakota than were moving out. And so when I heard this resolution, which is based on the premise that we're losing more than we're gaining, the light bulb lit up, and it says that's not true. And so I urge this body not to vote for a resolution that's not true. And then I Googled it real quick. The Washington Post. If you Google it real quick, you'll get to the Washington Post, and they list the states that are gaining more than they're losing. In South Dakota, we're listed as one of the ones that gain more young educated people than we lose. As a matter of fact, for every 2 that we lose, we gain 3. Therefore, I think I'm going to be opposed to this because it's just based on a falsehood. And the reason we promulgate this myth is because we're humble people. We've got to get over being humble and say that things are going well. The Board of Regents is doing a good job. Well, shouldn't have said that. I just lost a good senator's vote from Isabel. But I think this is a matter of our culture in South Dakota where we're just humble and we always think we're second best some days, and we're not. South Dakota is attracting more people, and I urge a no vote on this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Further remarks? Senator Russell, good afternoon.
I thank the body for your patience on this. I think I understand this as I look at that resolution. I didn't like some of what the prime sponsor said over there. I think that there was it was a little over the top in some of the invective. But as I read through the resolution, I think that there is some value in having the discussion about whether or not we as a state have a serious problem as it relates to the number of people that we're losing, that we educate, and the number of young people that can't stay in the state because of a lack of good employment. And I think of I just think of my 2 brothers. I have 2 brothers, and both of them are in different states. And the reason why they're there is because of employment opportunities and what they could reap for wages here in the state of South Dakota versus where they ended up. One in Minnesota and one in California, making 6-figure salaries, doing very well. And I think of what they could have done for the state of South Dakota, and it bothers me. And part of the other reason that I think that there's some merit to the resolution and that we really shouldn't give it short shrift, that this passed through the House, and I think that it would be, I think that it would make us look bad, especially as those of us in the Republican Party, if we just toss it away as not an issue. Because I do believe that in the state of South Dakota, we have a significant problem with too many people working 2 and 3 jobs to make a living, and jobs that may or may not be of the quality of jobs that those people are in fact qualified to do. So I would hope that we don't just kill the resolution summarily. I didn't appreciate all of the comments of the sponsor, but I think that it sends the wrong message when we indifferently say, well, you know, it isn't something that has any merit, because I think that it in fact does have some merit. And I think that we need to look at it from the standpoint that we think that we can always strive to be better, that we should always be striving to be better, and that we as a legislature should encourage those entities of government to do a better job in keeping our young people here. I think of my children and how quickly I'm probably going to be losing them to out of state also. And it really scares me. When my children could go an hour to Nebraska and pay $6,000 or $8,000 less for tuition and room and board at Chadron, Nebraska than they can where I went to school at Spearfish, concerns me greatly. The other thing that really concerns me is the fact that we put these people on a per capita basis largely in debt in our 4-year system before we turn them loose to have to go to California and Minnesota to find employment that they can actually pay back their debts. So I really am concerned about the thought process that everything's okay and that we don't need to be encouraging these entities of government to do a better job. So with that, I ask that you give serious consideration to the resolution before you.
Thank you, Senator. Further remarks, Senator Partridge.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I appreciate the previous speaker in related to wanting to what this thing's going to do, but I just go to the wording of this thing towards the end and see that what it's asking us to do, and it's not doing what the previous speaker talked about. Some great comments, but that's not what this is. I'd ask you to resist this because it basically asks or tells the Governor's Office of Economic Development things that we're already doing. There's so much here that is going on and so many economic development efforts that we are doing. Now, are we operating on all cylinders every day, all the time? You know, maybe not, but I mean, we're darn close. So I'd ask you to resist this and vote no on this for that reason, because there is a lot of great effort being done with very limited resources. You talk about delivering money, you know, you have to put money into these things and make it work, and it's really hard based on the small appropriation that we give. So I'd ask that you vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Further remarks? Any further remarks? House Concurrent Resolution 1001. Senator Boland, would you like to close?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I would encourage you to support this, based primarily. I mean, you can talk about the words, the language. Again, the origin of this was a work that Representative Rasmussen did with students at the USD campus. Most of these ideas, if not all of them, came from students. And I worked with Representative Rasmussen after the original resolution was filed to try to make some changes in the wording, these type of things. So I would encourage you to vote for this. I don't think this is the most significant resolution or piece of or anything we're going to deal with this time around, but I'd encourage you to vote for it. I know the students who worked on this are hoping this passes, so I'd give it the benefit of the doubt. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Further remarks? Hearing none. The question before the body is House Concurrent Resolution 1001. Those in favor of adopting the language will say aye. Those opposed say no, and the Secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland? Aye. Kamak? Aye. Cronin? No. Kurd? No. Ewing? Frerichs. Greenfield. Haverly. Heinert. Kennedy. Klum. Colbeck. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Nelson. Nesseba. Netherton. Norstrup. Otten. Partridge. Peters. Russell. Solano. Stalzer. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Mr. President, there are 12 yeas, 17 nays, and 6 excused.
So the motion, having failed to receive a majority vote of the members-elect, is declared lost.
Senator Solano moves that the Committee on Judiciary be instructed to deliver Senate Bill 175 to the floor of the Senate pursuant to Joint Rule 7-7.
Again, Joint Rule 7-7 has been invoked relative to Senate Bill 175. We'll go to Senator Solano for comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'd ask the body to allow Senate Bill 175, which was an act to revise certain provisions regarding the carrying of concealed pistols by certain persons, was heard today in Senate Judiciary. Proponents included the Sheriff's Association, sheriff from Butte County, one opponent from Department of Public Safety that had one sentence opposition. So ask for your favorable consideration invoking Rule 7-7. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further remarks, Senator Russell.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Yeah, we devoted an entire hour to this matter this morning. It was a good debate, I thought. There was, we had a more than fair hearing. There was bipartisan opposition to the, I think there's only one vote in favor of the bill. And we were fair in that when an amendment, an oral amendment came up to try and work some magic on the bill, we allowed the prime sponsor to come forward and tell us whether or not he was in favor of the amendment. He wasn't. And then the bill subsequently went down on a 6-1 vote. There was bipartisan opposition to the bill. It had a good hearing. I'd ask that you resist the motion.
Thank you. Further remarks, Senator Netherton.
Mr. President, thank you. I was also in that committee this morning, and it is true that we had really good testimony on it. The chair did allow latitude, let the prime sponsor come back, and the support just wasn't there. You know, I voted differently than some of the members in this room on the amendment, but I'm just going to ask you guys to defeat the smokeout. This bill does deserve to be heard in a committee, and that's where it was heard, where there was allowed public testimony, and we heard that there, and we wouldn't want to open that up on the floor when that's actually a committee issue. And so I would just ask you guys to not smoke this out.
Thank you, Senator. Any further remarks? Further remarks on the invocation of Rule 7-7 on Senate Bill 175? Seeing none, this is a standing vote, essentially. It requires 1/3 of the members, so the threshold is 12. All those in favor of invoking Rule 7-7 on 175 will stand. That motion has passed, and Senate Bill 175 will be delivered to the floor by the Committee on Judiciary.
Senator Kamak moves that Senate Bill 194 be referred from the Committee on Ag and Natural Resources to the Committee on Joint Appropriations.
Been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 194 be moved from Ag and Natural Resources to Joint Appropriations. Comments on that motion? Senator Kamak?
This particular bill, if we were to have the hearing, in the end, we would need to refer it to joint appropriations anyway, so I urge your support.
Further comments? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All those in favor of transferring Senate Bill 194 from Ag to Joint Appropriations will say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That motion is passed. Consideration of committee reports.
Senator Kurd moves that the reports of the Standing Committee on Transportation on Senate Bill 115, Committee on Senate Appropriations on Senate Bill 81, and the Committee on Judiciary on Senate Bill 93 be adopted.
Is there a second? All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That motion is passed.
Senator Heiner moves that Senate Bill 162 be placed on the calendar and that action on the motion be deferred till Tuesday, February 20th, the 25th legislative day.
All right, and I'm going to restate that. It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 162 be placed on the calendar and that action in the motion be deferred to Tuesday, February 20th, the 25th legislative day. Comments on that motion, Senator Heinert?
Well, Mitakapi, Mr. President, well, thank you. So just so the body knows, we're not voting to calendar it right now. What we're doing is just delaying that vote until Tuesday when we have more members present that wish to consider this vote. Lamia.
Thank you, sir. Senator Boland.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Well, again, I would like to restate that this bill had a very fair hearing. We cannot continue to postpone things. There was testimony on both sides of this issue when it was heard a couple days ago in committee. This bill does not need...
State your point.
We're talking about the motion to defer, not the bill.
Okay.
That is true. I'm going to give a little latitude because of the nature of the motion and the fact that it's out of the ordinary the way we're dealing with this. But please confine your remarks to the motion at hand.
We do not need to defer this bill. We can take care of it right now. There is no need for continual deference on this particular issue. We can. Everybody knows that we meet for 4 days a week. We try our very best to clear our calendar every day. So I would urge you to resist this motion. This bill needs to be decided now, and I would ask that we not defer this bill until another day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further remarks? Senator Heinert? No? Further remarks? Hearing none. One moment, please. Okay. Again, the motion requires a majority of the members present. It is a voice vote. All those in favor will say aye. Aye! Those opposed say no. No! The president is in doubt. We will proceed to a standing vote. All those in favor of the motion to defer action will stand. 17 people rose. There are only 29 people present, so that does constitute a majority of the members present, and that motion has passed.
Mr. President, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Point of order. So is it accurate to say that on Tuesday, a vote will be taken to strike the knot? Is that accurate?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I don't believe that that is accurate. They're not going to work? I don't believe that that is accurate, Mr. President. I think what I have heard from the LRC is that we don't have to strike the knot anymore. All we have to do is just calendar it. And that would be the vote on Tuesday.
The my ruling is that the motion was on the deferral of the issue. A motion to calendar the bill would require a majority vote of the members elect, not a majority vote of the members present. And so I think it's in your best interest if we don't proceed to whether or not that motion was relative to calendaring. Would you like to restate your position?
Yes, Mr. President. I wasn't asking for the calendaring motion. What I was saying, rather than striking the knot on Tuesday, we are just voting to calendar it on Tuesday.
Well, I think that's the same thing.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. So on Tuesday, the question will be whether or not to take it up for consideration. That will require a majority vote of the members elect. All right. Are we clear? Thank you. We're having a bit of a technology malfunction. We are going to be sending Jill around to record the vote on HCR 1001. It's in the system somewhere, but we need the printout, and we don't know that we'll get that before session closes today. So when Jill comes around, please share with her what your vote was, and if somebody has left the floor, if your seatmate has left and you recall how they voted, please share that with her.
We have the numbers. We know it was 16 to 19, or what was it, 12? 12 yeas, 17 nays, and 6 excused. So we have that. We just don't know who voted who. So if you can remember, you can.
If the lieutenant governor is anywhere close to South Dakota, if he could get back here, that'd be appreciated.
Okay,
We're gonna walk back what I just said, and we're going to have Boots read the roll call again on HCR 1001. I know it happened a few minutes ago, but if you can recall how you voted, please share with us the accurate depiction of that vote.
This is a memory test. Senator Bolin. Aye. Kamak. Cronin. Kurd. Ewing is excused. Frerichs. Greenfield. Haverly. No. Heinert. Jensen is excused. Kennedy? No. Killer is excused. Klum? Colbeck? Langer is excused. Maher? Monroe? Nelson? Neseba? Netherton? Norstrup? Otten? Partridge? Peters? Rush is excused. Russell? Soholt's excused. Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Thank you. I think we got it.
First reading of House bills.
We're going to do this together because we've got 22 of them. House Bill 1007, an act to require any initiated measure to embrace only one subject. 1106, an act to authorize hunting preference points to be granted to persons aged 10 years or older. House Bill 1109, an act to provide for parole eligibility and early final discharge for certain inmates. House Bill 1111, an act to revise certain definitions regarding criminal street gang activity. 1114, an act to establish certain requirements for students enrolling in resident school districts or assigned schools after participating in open enrollment. House Bill 1140, an act to revise certain provisions regarding access to public water. 1146, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the consumption of alcoholic beverages by passengers aboard vehicles operated by licensed carriers. 1161, an act to revise certain references to the International Building Code. 1163, an act to revise certain provisions regarding municipal publication deadlines. 1166, an act to revise certain provisions regarding waivers recommended by the School Finance Accountability Board. 1168, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the abandonment or dissolution of television translator districts. 1169, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the commissioner form of municipal government.
As the President Pro Tem, I have assigned the bills to the following committees: Ag and Natural Resources, 1106 and 1140; Education, 1114; Judiciary, 1109, 1111, 1230, 1271, and 1278; Local Government, 1161, 1163, 1168, 1169, and 1183; Senate Appropriations, 1166, 1277; State Affairs, 1007, 1216, 1248, 1255, 1268; Transportation, 1146 and 1270. Okay, the microphones are now working again. The remainder of the votes that occur today will be tabulated by hand. We're going to turn back the clock a couple decades. Bear with us. We'll get through this if we all agree to struggle through together. We're now on item of business number 12, consent calendar.
House Bill 1131, an act to authorize certain road district trustees and employees to receive compensation under a district contract. House Bill 1154, an act to revise certain provisions regarding municipal lease purchase agreements. And House Bill 1195, an act to revise certain provisions regarding refunds of motor vehicle license fees.
The question before the body is final consideration of House Bills 1131, 1154 as amended, and 1195 as amended. Are there any questions on any of these bills? A reminder, this is the consent calendar. Any questions on any of the bills? Hearing none. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed will say no, and the secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Aye. Ewing is excused. Frerichs. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. Aye. Jensen's excused. Kennedy. Aye. Killer is excused. Klum. Aye. Kolbeck. Aye. Langer. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Aye. Nesseba. Aye. Netherton. Aye. Norstrup. Aye. Otten. Aye. Partridge. Aye. Peters. Aye. Rush is excused. Russell. Aye. Soholt's excused. Solano. Aye. Stalzer. Aye. Sutton. Aye. Tapio. Aye. Tiedemann. Aye. White. Aye. Wick. Youngberg? Aye. Mr. President, there are 29 yeas, 6 excused.
So the consent calendar items, House Bills 1131, 1154, and 1195, having received majority votes of the members elect, are declared passed. Questions on their titles? Hearing none, the titles are deemed correct. Second reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 155, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the liability of the cost of jail confinement.
Senate Bill 155, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Maher, good afternoon.
Mr. President, I have an amendment at the desk.
There's an amendment at the desk. I don't have it just yet.
It's 155 alpha alpha.
Are you moving 155 AA at this moment?
That is correct.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Comments on that motion, Senator Maher?
This bill had a hearing the other day in Senate Judiciary. They made some recommendations. This is a part of their recommendations that I've come up with. I think it helps enhance the bill as we go forward.
Senator Kurd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would request favorable consideration by the Senate for the utilization of Rule 5-17 with respect to the Maher Amendment.
Rule 517 has been invoked. If this garners enough support, this bill and the pending amendment will be held over for 2 days effectively till next Wednesday. There has to be a day intervening. So are there comments on that? There being none, all of those in favor will rise. In favor of invoking 517, that is supported. Senate Bill 155 will be held over until Wednesday, at which time it will be on the calendar with a pending amendment.
Senate Bill 98, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the 911 emergency surcharge, the public safety 911 emergency charge, and the revenue distribution, and to repeal the 911 emergency surcharge sunset clause.
Senate Bill 98, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Peters, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Well, Senate Bill 98 is essentially a redo of the 911 bill we had last year. Last year's bill, we were trying to put in some, basically a hammer for compliance when it comes to the 911 answering points to ensure that they become in compliance with the laws that we put into place in 2012. It didn't matter apparently how often and how thorough our attorneys reviewed the piece of legislation that passed this body, but we came up with a glitch in the statute, and ultimately, with that statute that we passed last year, changed session laws, which then left a gap year. So the 911 laws then are repealed on July 1 of 2018 and don't go back into effect in the distribution of the 911 fees until July 1st of 2019. So the first part of Senate Bill 98 is to basically rewind the bill from last year and still put in the minimum safety, or excuse me, the minimum requirements for the 911 service centers to be coming in compliance and the procedures set forth in that process. I would like to also announce that all of our 911 answering points within the state of South Dakota, all 28 of them actually have become in compliance with the law that we put into place last year. So our law did actually work. The second part of this particular bill is to repeal the 911 sunset. Now, the original discussion about the 911 sunset was put on in 2012, and the reason was before we were working on the 911 next-gen system, the 911 Coordination Board did not have all of the information they would need in order to put in the system. We are almost fully into operation in the 911 next-gen system with the geographical, so you can text and call and they'll be able to find you wherever you're at. We're almost fully implemented with that particular project. They now have contracts in place. They know exactly what they need. They were hoping that the $1.25 could be scaled back to the $1, which is what the sunset is. That is not the case at this time, and so I'm asking this body to repeal the sunset at this time. Every state that has a 911 surcharge does it in this manner, and they fund their next-gen system and their 911 servicing centers in this manner. So with that, I'll stand by for questions. Obviously, it's a very complicated mechanism. I did put a graph on your desks today that shows how money transfers in from the 911 surcharge and how it goes out to the counties. If we don't pass this and we don't take away the sunset clause on this 911 fee, your counties and your cities who operate 911 servicing centers are going to have to offset that cost somehow. So I would highly encourage a yes vote on Senate Bill 98. Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd stand by for questions.
Thank you. Further remarks on Senate Bill 98? Any further remarks? Senator Russell, good afternoon again.
Question for the sponsor.
State your question.
How much money will this generate on a yearly basis? What are these local governments going to lose because of the glitch if we don't pass this bill?
Senator Peters, do you care to answer the question?
I'm going to have to ask a follow-up question because essentially, if the bill does not pass today, I'm going to have to ask a question because it's two parts. One, it's the surcharge part, or the sunset repeal. And if not, if the question is dealing with the sunset, that's one answer. If it's dealing with the distribution of funding and the gap year, that's another answer.
Was that a question to the question?
Yep.
Okay, would you care to answer the question that was asked in response to your question?
Yeah, sorry about that compound question. There were more than one question in that, and for that I'm sorry. So I'd break it down, and my first question would be, what is the aggregate amount that will be raised on a yearly basis?
Senator Peters, would you care to answer that?
What I would do is I'd point you to the South Dakota 911 Coordinated Board annual report that is submitted to the legislature every year, and one of the appendices will give you that information, but it's several $1 million.
Senator Russell. Several million was the answer.
Yeah, and I did get that. I'm curious, though, as it relates to pitching the bill here, and we are going to have a one-year gap, potentially. I'm curious about, in that one-year gap, how much money we're actually talking about. And I understand that it's in millions. I would have not thought that it wouldn't have been. Do we have any kind of a ballpark figure as to how much we're going to raise? No idea?
Mr. President, I did not calculate that 1 year, and it's a change in the distribution formula on how counties receive money, and I did not calculate the difference, but I can get you a graph that would show you the changes. Essentially, If we go back and use the gap year, your counties are going to decrease 2.5 cents per line per county, and there'll be a decrease of 28 cents per line to the state fund in the gap year. So I have not calculated that out by line because I don't know how many lines we have in the state.
Thank you.
Senator Russell.
And then the second question would be, as it relates to taking off the sunset, if this bill were to fail, how much money are we talking about in terms of, on a yearly basis, if the sunset was not removed?
Senator Peters, would you care to try to answer that question?
I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about, but the 911 Coordination Fund projections for annual expenditures are going to be approximately $3.5 million, and if we do not repeal the sunset, they will only be bringing in $900,000.
Thank you.
Senator Russell, you have the floor.
I believe I got an answer to my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further remarks? Senator Nelson.
Yes, sir. I have a question for the good senator from Falk and Potter and Campbell and about 5 other counties that voted against this measure. I was hoping he could edify us, educate us on what his concerns were. The good senator from Falk, Potter, Campbell. There's a couple more there.
Senator Cronin.
Yes, thank you. I just have to, I guess mine is a fundamental difference in the way that when we wrote this legislation, I can't even remember how long ago, 2011, 12, I was under the impression that we were going to purchase the next-gen system. That is not what happened, and I have had heartburn over that issue and that issue alone. The fact is, though, that if this measure fails, the counties will either have to pick it up or not have a 911 system. But my frustration with this was in the fact that when we put it together, we calculated out our best estimate as drafters in the legislation, what it would cost to, what we would have to raise to pay for the next-gen system at that time. And over the years, the first 2 or 3 years of that process, they realized that, the answers I've gotten is they realized that that purchasing wasn't necessarily the best idea, and that they would want to lease. And fiscally, that's the best thing to do, because the system, as we see with our state radio system, we're facing an issue with that, much like we would with this, where the technology and the usefulness every 10 to 15 years is outdated and unusable. So that was my frustration with this particular bill.
Further remarks, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for that. Sir, would you be able to help us understand Representative Howard's concerns? Do you recall what her opposition to it was? I found her to be a very astute appropriator, and I was curious if you recall what her concerns were.
With all due respect to the person posing the question, it's probably virtually impossible, unless you recall any direct quotes from her in committee. So if there's other testimony on the floor, perhaps you'd have an opportunity to get a hold of her directly, but unless Senator Cronin would like to answer that, I think we'll move on. Any further remarks? Further remarks? Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the information that was provided from our good friend from Gettysburg, there was some consultants hired in order to come up with this back in 2012 to decide what was the best use and the best stewards of taxpayer dollars in putting in the next-gen system. One of the options presented was to purchase. The other option was to lease the equipment. And for those of you who are interested in knowing about efficiencies, since 2012, they've been building a statewide system which has created some efficiencies and cost savings across the state. We have eliminated 28 standalone phone systems, we've eliminated 28 maintenance contracts, and we've created one. But those cost savings can't keep up with the static surcharge amount. And technology is always changing. As you all know, we have to get new phones every couple of years, and this is just the technology that relays the information that our phones use. And so as technology changes throughout, it didn't make sense to buy something that was going to be out of date as soon as it was installed. So the process that the coordination board went through is to decide how technology works and how they buy, and then it gives us the option of replacing. And now, if our local 911 guys have a technology glitch at the local county or city level when they're answering the 911 system, all they do is they call the contractor at this time and say, hey, I got an issue, and it's all covered within the contract. It's not up to the IT guys at the local level to fix the 911 system. So there have been a lot of efficiencies. The system is working. We're going to be in full implementation by the end of the year. It is a better system. It's a safer system, and I just encourage a yes vote on Senate Bill 98.
Any further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the body is final consideration of Senate Bill 98. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no, and the secretary will call the roll.
Just a minute, I think we're back. Senator Boland. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. No. Kurd. Ewing is gone. Frericks. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. Aye. Jensen is gone. Kennedy. Aye. Klum. Aye. Colbeck. Aye. Langers. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Nesseba. Aye. Netherton. Aye. Norstrup. Aye. Otten. Aye. Partridge. Aye. Peters. Aye. Rush is excused. Russell. No. Holtz. Solano. Bingo. Aye. Don't confuse me. Okay, Stalzer. Aye. Sutton. Tapio? Aye. Tiedemann? Aye. White? Aye. Wick? Aye. Youngberg? Aye. Mr. President, there are 26 yeas, 3 nays, and 6 excused.
So Senate Bill 98, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is declared passed. Are there questions on its title? Hearing none, the title is deemed correct.
Senate Bill 214, an act to create a legislative compensation commission to review legislative salaries.
Senate Bill 214, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Peters, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as you all know, we all spend a lot of time up here away from our friends and family, and a lot of us aren't lucky enough over the years to have your family come up and spend a couple of weeks with you. But because of that, and because of the tumultuous time that we have with a variety of different reasons being legislators, you know, we've had a lot of conversations and a lot of discussion talking about legislative pay, not just legislative pay, but state employees' salaries and how to make it so everybody is being able to meet the needs of their families. The idea and the intent of Senate Bill 214 is to really create a commission that's out and away from the legislature, independent review of what our legislative salaries are based on our experiences in our life and what we do, because South Dakota is unique, and this takes it out of the hands of us to come up with a legislative pay package. It creates an independent commission that reports to our executive board. I don't feel like we're passing the buck to an independent commission, but we do have some legislative oversight. As the report would be given to the executive board, it would be then up to them to change our budget based on the recommendations of this independent commission on salaries. And so I guess with that, I could stand by for any questions, but this is just another avenue in order to have a conversation about legislative salaries and pay, and have it discussed outside of the hands of the folks that it would affect directly. I know there's an amendment coming. I would urge opposition to the amendment, and I'll stand by for further questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for the remarks. Senator Nesseba, I believe you have an amendment at the desk. Would you like it moved at this point?
I would like to do that, Mr. President, and I would just also like to note that I was a proponent of this bill and voted for it when it came out of the Appropriations Committee.
Senator Nessebar, we can get to that in a moment. It's
I would like to move.
Before you, 214 WA?
I would like to move 214 WA.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Senator Nessebar, please speak to your motion.
And thank you for that, the pause there. I got a little excited when I stand up on the floor of this body.
Understandable.
Senate Bill 214 is a good bill. I was a little concerned about, if you look at page 1, line 6, you'll note that it says not more than 6 of whom shall be from the same political party. I did go look at the current voter registration in South Dakota on the Secretary of State's website. And if you look at that, you will find that the Republican Party does have 46% of the registered voters in the state of South Dakota. So I do sometimes need to remind this body. I think when we are here and there's 29 Republicans and 6 Democrats, we start to think that the rest of the world looks like that, and we sometimes forget that the majority of people in South Dakota are not actually Republicans, right? Most citizens, registered voters in South Dakota, are actually Democrats and independents combined. That said, it still seemed reasonable to have a council or put together a legislative compensation commission with 6 folks that I suspect would be Republicans. And so, since we're going to all the trouble of having those folks get together and have a meeting and talk about compensation, I just wanted to add one more issue for them to think about, and that would just be to have them also just draw our legislative district boundary lines for us as well, where they're getting together. So, and I suspect there might be some other proponents that want to speak to this, Mr. President. So that's what the amendment would do.
I suspect there might be some opponents too, Senator. Further comments? Further remarks on the motion to amend? Senator Bolin.
Well, thank you. All of a sudden, something caught my eye, or caught the ear. I would direct you to Article 3, Section 5 of the South Dakota Constitution, which says the following: the legislature shall apportion its membership by dividing the state into as many single-member legislative districts as there are state senators. Therefore, I would strongly believe and strongly am totally convinced that based on that sentence found on page 12 of this little green book, again, Article 3, Section 5 of the Constitution, that amendment would not be constitutional. I will make that claim today. Thank you.
Thank you for the remarks. Senator Frericks, good afternoon, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to you. And I know we want to get moving here for the day, but I just have to weigh in from my standpoint. I want to thank the good senator from Sioux Falls for bringing the amendment, and I also thank the other senator from Sioux Falls, or at least the Sioux Falls metro area, for bringing the bill, because this is a great concept. And in response to my friend from Canton that just talked about the authority of the legislature, I also am not aware of anything that would prohibit the legislature from delegating that authority to a citizen commission. And that's what we really have before us. This citizen commission can not only take care of the salaries, but also take care of drawing those districts. And we know the concept of elected officials choosing their voters just doesn't sound proper out there, and it's not something we should advocate for doing. And so therefore, here we have an equitable way to have a commission that can have a dual purpose: take care of legislative salaries and legislative districts. Ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further comments on the motion to amend? Senator Nelson.
I'll save it for the bill.
Further remarks? Further remarks on the motion to amend? The question then before the body is the motion to amend Senate Bill 214 with 214 WA. This is a voice vote. All those in favor will say aye. Aye! All those opposed say no. No! That motion has failed. Back to further comments, further remarks on Senate Bill 214. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, sir. Well, I rise in strong opposition to this. It shows poor leadership on our part. It seeks to, again, expand government, have more government, And it defers the responsibility of this to an unelected body of people to take the legislators' hands off of this. It also bespeaks of something more inherently problematic that we've seen here, and that's a certain amount of arrogance. We've seen bills that sought to drug test us that were quickly pushed aside. Now, in a year where our state employees have yet, again, looking at no raise or a promise of no raise, before we take care of those folks, we're talking about a self-serving measure to have it so that our salaries are raised. The salaries here was no surprise to anybody here. Everybody here, I believe, most of them, have all ran and understood what the salary entails. And let's be frank, it's a civic duty to serve up here. It should not be a bonanza. Because as we've seen, when we make it a bonanza to serve the public, we can't get rid of these politicians. They stay in office forever. I don't want this position to be a comfortable bonanza of money for anyone. Because frankly, this is no different than jury duty. And I'd be happy with us having the salaries commensurate to that important civic duty. But to put this before the fact of looking at and publicly doing anything about our state employees, we've had state employees and state educators have come before this body and asked to have their salary adjusted, and both those bills were killed yesterday. So this is not leadership. The leadership that I learned in the Marines is, before you eat, your Marines eat. Before you sleep, your Marines sleep. If your Marines are injured and you're injured, your Marines get treatment before you. And here we have state employees and educators that are in tough straits throughout the state of South Dakota, and instead of addressing that and passing bills to take care of them, we're going to bring forth this self-serving legislation that creates more government so that our fingerprints aren't on raising our own salaries. That's not leadership. This is unacceptable. If you want to support this type of stuff, you should campaign on this. Tell South Dakotans that when you run for office, you're not happy with the salary that they're offering you, and you're going to come into office and you're going to seek to raise your own pay. You'll never get here, because South Dakotans will see that as a self-serving designs that it is. It's not appropriate. That's why not one of these folks here have ever campaigned on such like that. Shame on us for even bringing this bill. It needs to be killed.
Senator Wick, you have the floor, sir. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Instead of talking about bonanzas and all the money we're going to see from this, let me paint you another picture. I have the luxury of being the closest of you to the state of Minnesota, where my house is. I've mentioned a couple things that happen in Minnesota government because of where I live. If you flip on a TV channel on our cable provider, a third of our stations are based in Minnesota. So we get a lot of news out of there. What if, let me just paint this picture. What if this commission comes back and says we're overpaid? Could happen. You see, that's what happened in Minnesota. They voted themselves raises again and again and again and again. They built themselves dorms because they didn't like paying rent. And the salaries just kept going up. Finally, there was a change in the leadership. And they said, we're not quite sure what it should be, but we think it's too much. And we're not quite sure where it should land. We'd like to talk to people. We'd like to get some people who do this for a living, and we'd like to get a second opinion. And that's what this bill does. Let's step back. Let's get a second opinion. Let's take a look, an honest, outside look. And let's find out, maybe we're overpaid. None of us think that, but a lot of people seem to. So let's find out. Please vote yes.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to clarify that your house is not in Minnesota, correct?
I can see Minnesota from my house.
I think there was a misplaced modifier in there that would have implied that you're in the wrong chamber.
No.
You should be far east of here. Further remarks? Further remarks on Senate Bill 214. Senator Russell, I assume you're rising to speak?
I am.
All
And
right.
thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. We've heard about having an honest outside look, and that whatever commission that this creates may very well take a look and say, well, these guys are overpaid. The whole premise of the legislation isn't about us being overpaid. The original idea came from the House side to create a mechanism to raise, and I think the idea is that we wanted to go up by 40% in the first year, maybe it was more than that. And this appears to be some kind of a compromise introduced by the committee on the Appropriations Committee itself. If we want an honest outside look, I don't think that us appointing the people to this 10-member commission is probably going to get, in the minds of the public, will be an honest outside look. Because if we're appointing the people that we are tasking with the decision-making of pushing for a salary increase or a decrease, I think most of the people are going to recognize, most of the taxpayers of the state are going to recognize that if we appoint the people that are going to raise our salary, that maybe we're appointing people who are going to raise our salary. Maybe it's a self-fulfilling promise. So from my perspective, I don't know that that would be what I would consider an honest outside look at this situation. From my perspective, I think that what would be an honest way of going about this would be to simply bring a bill. If it's the desire to get to $10,000, let's say, because I think I heard that figure somewhere along the line. If that's really what the desire is, that we want to go up by 40% and have $10,000, I don't think that we need to hide behind a commission that we appoint. As members of the legislature, we get the authority to appoint who we handpick who we want on that commission. So from my perspective, I think that this is kind of a shell game that gets played a lot in Washington, D.C., and I think the people will see it for what it is. And so I hope that we're a little bit cautious about doing this today, because I think that what it proves to the people of the state of South Dakota is that we're trying to manufacture the same kind of smoke and mirrors that they come up with at the federal level. And I'd hope we don't do that.
Further remarks? Further remarks? Senator Peters, would you like to give your close?
Yes, please, thank you. Well, this has nothing to do with smoke and mirrors. This has everything to do with right sizing. We've heard a lot about state employees not getting a raise for the last couple of years, and yeah, right, that it stinks. And we're going to do whatever we can this year to ensure that the state employees are treated right, that the providers in our state that are taking care of those people who haven't taken them care or that need help are being taken care of. We're going to do what we can do. We're going to withhold. We're going to do whatever we can for the Department of Corrections and the justice system as well. But the one thing that we haven't done over the years, especially over the last, I've been up here 14 years, the last thing we've not addressed any of the pay regarding what we do up here. It has not been addressed, it is not timely, and we have failed to take action on that. This is not asking for a raise. This takes it out of our hands to a certain extent, but I want to remind you that this creates, yes, a commission to take a look at it from an outsider's perspective, to kind of get and start walking in our shoes, to figure out exactly what we do up here, to know that we don't just work 9 to 3 up here, that we actually work. Some of us are here at 6 in the morning, sometimes 6:30 in the morning, and sometimes don't leave until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So we work hard. It's time for us to take a hard look at what we do year-round, what we do, and have a full picture of what our job truly is, because this issue has not been touched in well over a decade. I actually think it's been over 2 decades since this issue has been addressed. This is a common sense approach to put an outsider perspective, to take a look at this and have it reviewed at least once a decade. This has nothing to do with raising pay, but at least have a common sense approach of reviewing our employee package, because the state employee package is every year. Our providers get new money every year. This talks about 10 years to take a look at an employee package for the legislative branch once a decade. That's what this does, and gives an outsider perspective. So with that, and in closing, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further remarks? Hearing none. The question before the body is final consideration of Senate Bill 214. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no, and the secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland? Aye. Kamak? Aye. Cronin? Aye. Kurd? Aye. Ewing? Frerichs? No. Greenfield? Haverly? Aye. Heinert? Aye. Jensen is excused. Kennedy? Aye. Klum? Colbeck? Aye. Maher? Aye. Monroe? Aye. Nelson? Aye. Nesseba? Aye. Netherton? Aye. Northrup? Aye. Otten? Aye. Partridge? Aye. Peters? Aye. Russell? No. Solano? Aye. Stalzer? Aye. Sutton? No. Tapio? No. Tiedemann? Aye. White? Aye. Wick? Aye. Youngberg? Aye. Heinert? No. Mr. President, there are 22 yeas, 7 nays, and 6 excused.
So Senate Bill 214, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is declared passed. Are there questions on the title? Hearing none, the title is deemed correct.
Senate Bill 63, an act to revise certain prohibitions regarding methamphetamines and to create a mandatory penalty for a violation thereof.
Senate Bill 63, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Russell, I have up here at the desk an amendment that has your name on it. I know it was distributed yesterday. Is it your intention to move that amendment, sir?
There was a new amendment that was distributed today, and it is 63WB. Is that the one you have? If
We do not have it up here at the front. We'll need 5 copies. There's probably one on the Greenfield desk, probably one on a few other desks that are vacant. All right. Thank you. Is there a second on Amendment 63WB? It's been moved and seconded. Senator Russell, when you have a moment, if you would speak to your amendment. And I believe that it is directly tied to the bill, so if you would care to stray into the merits of the bill, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and I will speak both to the amendment and the bill with the President's permission, as the amendment significantly alters the bill itself. First, I'll describe the amendment. As you can see, the amendment deletes the entire page 3. On page 2, it deletes lines 23 and 24. And it deletes lines 1 through 13 on page 4. And on page 4, line 19, it deletes the statutory reference to 2242.2, which has to do with both Class 1 and 2 controlled substances. In effect, what the amendment does is it makes sure that this only applies to the crime of distribution of methamphetamine, rather than any other class of drugs that were previously involved in the bill. Further, it also, after much discussion with many members here in the legislature, we are amending in that in order to trigger some of the provisions of the bill that have to do with sentencing, that you have to have more than 5 grams of methamphetamine in order to trigger the effects of the bill. So the amendment is designed after 2 or 3 different revisions to alleviate some of the concerns that we've had during the process. I will give you just a couple of statistics here. In 2012, in the state of South Dakota, there were 600, and I believe if I'm reading this correctly, 669 arrests regarding methamphetamine. In the most recent year, we have shot up from 669 to 3,179 methamphetamine arrests. We are having a significant impact on the people of our state, the health and the welfare of many of our families. And so the Attorney General brought Senate Bill 63 to address a number of the issues that we are facing in this critical fight against the expansion, the exponential expansion of methamphetamine arrest and problems that it creates in our community. What he has put together has to do with a number of enhancements of penalties as it relates to the distribution and manufacture. And in fact, I think what I'll do is I'll read through these so that you have a good idea of what is going on here mechanically in the bill. Number 1, it increases the penalty for distribution and manufacturing of methamphetamine to a Class 3 felony, which carries a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison and a $30,000 fine. The current law is a Class 4 felony with a maximum of 10 years and $20,000. Number 2, it enhances the distribution and manufacture of methamphetamine if a person possesses certain triggering items such as cash, firearms, and items associated with the trafficking of drugs to a Class 2 felony, which carries a maximum penalty of 25 years imprisonment and or a fine of $50,000. The current law is a Class 3 felony which carries 15 years and $30,000 as a max. Number 3, it enhances the distribution of methamphetamine to a minor to a Class 1 felony that carries a maximum penalty of 50 years imprisonment and or a $50,000 fine. The current law for distribution of methamphetamine to a minor is a Class 2 felony that carries with it a 25-year maximum and or a $50,000 fine. Number 4, it provides that the mandatory state penitentiary sentence for distribution and manufacturing of methamphetamine to include a year on the first conviction, 10 years for a second or subsequent conviction, 5 years for the first conviction of distribution to a minor, and 15 years for a second or subsequent conviction of the distribution of methamphetamine to a minor. The current law provides for mandatory sentences that are rarely applied. So with that, that gives you the bare bones understanding of the bill and the critical nature of the situation, because as I said, in 2012, there were 669 arrests statewide, and in the most current year, it was 3,179 arrests. I would hope that you give it good due consideration that it requires and that we pass this bill. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Russell. Further comments on the motion to amend with 63 WB? Further comments on the motion to amend? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That motion has passed. Senate Bill 63 is so amended. Further comments on Senate Bill 63 as amended? Senator Kennedy, good afternoon once again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm rising in opposition to Senate Bill 63. Understand, I think methamphetamine is a terrible drug that has terrible effects on the people who use it. But I don't think methamphetamine is the only terrible drug that people are exposed to in our society today. We've all heard of the opioid crisis that's going on around the country and is starting to happen in South Dakota. So I'm wondering from the outset, why are we taking methamphetamine and making distribution of methamphetamine a more serious offense than distribution of heroin, distribution of opioids, distribution of other equally, if not more, dangerous drugs? You know, it's easy to come up with big, broad adjectives and talk about crises and you know, I don't know what other words I heard earlier expressed in support of this bill. But I think we need to look at the reality of things. You need to look at the prison jail cost estimate on this bill, because it tells you how many cases LRC anticipates we're going to see over the next 10 years. The numbers of cases aren't that significant. The cost is. Prison jail cost estimate on this bill is roughly $4.7 million over 10 years. And what are we accomplishing with it? Are we really changing anything with respect to the drug issues we face in South Dakota? I would suggest that we've had 50 years of let's get tough on drugs. And the only thing we can demonstrate from that is our prisons are now full to overcrowded. You know, these numbers of arrests, I would be curious to know of those 3,000 some odd arrests for methamphetamine, how many of those were for ingestion or mere possession? My guess is you'd find that virtually all of them were. So, in my belief, this is a step in the wrong direction. We're not going to jail our way out of a meth crisis, an opioid crisis, any other drug crisis. And it's always easy to stand up and say, I'm tough on drugs. But sometimes I think the legislature needs to step back and say, is this a smart move? And I will tell you, the other problem I have with this bill is the last part, which takes away discretion from our judges in sentencing people that come before them. I'm a 40-year veteran of our legal system, and I will guarantee you I've had judges make decisions I didn't like. But I have always had respect for judges and for their job, and their job is to look at each case on its own, each defendant on his or her own, and to fashion the appropriate sentence given the facts, given who the defendant is, given what the offense was, and then determine what's appropriate. This law creates mandatory minimum sentences. They've not been successful in the federal system. They're not going to be successful here. And for people to stand up and say, well, this creates mandatory minimums, but don't worry about it because judges won't apply them, if that's the case, then let's not create them. So I think Senate Bill 63 is a step way too far, and it's a step in the wrong direction. And I would urge you to reject it.
Further remarks on Senate Bill 63 as amended? Further remarks, Senator Youngberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 63, I think any time you're trying to address a drug problem, I don't think we can say that it's a step in the wrong direction. When you have cases involving meth use that involve burglary, theft, domestic violence, and you come out and say that this will not be effective in any way, shape, or form, you know, I would disagree with that, and I would ask the body to support Senate Bill 63.
Thank you, sir. Senator Peters.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to disagree with my counterpart from Madison over here. I would urge an opposition just because of the mandatory minimums. We've been doing this, you know, this ties the hands of our judges. Why do we have judges if we're going to tie their hands and say, you know what, you're guilty of a crime, you have a mandatory minimum of X, without any perspective on what the situation might be? I guess at that point, I've always stood against mandatory minimums, and with that, I'd be in opposition to the bill.
Further remarks? Senator Heinert.
Well, Mitakapi, Mr. President.
Mitakapi.
Well, I can. Washte.
3 days ago, he gave me the pronunciation guide, and I've only now, after practicing it the last 3 nights, only now have I gotten the courage.
We sure appreciate that, Mr. President. We'll always be glad to visit with you. You know, members of the body, I rise as the chair of the Corrections Commission now, kind of the de facto chair, after the good representative from Rapid City was lost in his tragic accident. And if there's ever been a bill this session that I wish I could get an answer from him for, it would be this bill. Because I would love to have that knowledge and foresight that the good representative had when we talk about incarceration in our state. So when this bill came out, we met as a Corrections Commission. And the judges were on there. The good senator from Vermilion was there. I was there. You know, the entire commission met. And there was only one member that thought this was a good direction. Because the Department of Corrections is really trying to follow national trends, reduce prison populations, make sure violent offenders are locked away from public, but really bring drug courts and counseling and addiction therapy, that kind of stuff, especially into our rural areas. Now, we can talk about the 5 million over 10 years. But even in our own statistics of how much drug courts have saved South Dakota in other areas, foster care, other social programs, because now, as these parents are going through the drug court process and going through their treatment process, they're able to stay at home, get clean, and still be parents to their children. I think the scariest thing for me is a majority of the people that we are arresting and could be arresting for distribution are female in South Dakota. And our women's prison is bursting at the seams. And this is going to add to this problem. I appreciate the Attorney General bringing this. And it's better with the amendment. I will give him that. It is better with the amendment. But there needs to be a multi-prong approach. Because we're not going to incarcerate our way out of this. There needs to be the counseling, the therapy, the economic opportunity to find jobs, to be employed. And there needs to be a huge push to prevention. We have to get to our youngest children and say, this is never an option. So, you know, right now, with the amendment, it's better. I just don't think this is the direction we should be going. We need to have a serious talk and attack all facets of meth use and distribution in our state. With that, Pilamia Apolo.
Thank you. Further remarks? Senator Youngberg. Does any member care to speak before Senator Youngberg speaks a second time? Senator Neseba.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question for the prime sponsor.
State your question.
I'm trying to get a sense of what is 5 grams. I am concerned about distribution. So can you tell me something that weighs 5 grams and how you came to use that as your threshold amount? And again, thinking about distribution.
You know, I know that one of your leaders was the impetus for the 5 grams. And the reason why I say that is because that's essentially where the issues had come. One of the previous speakers had come to the committee and had concerns about the fact that we didn't have that trigger or that threshold, that essentially what we were doing was we were getting some folks that were, not amounts that were personal use, but what we're talking about here is not possession, we're talking about distribution. And the precursor element or the predicate question will be, did we possess with intent, or did we distribute more than 5 grams in order to trigger this particular statute? And these were all done. So if you're interested in why the particular amounts, there was no amount in the first bill, but at the behest of the trial lawyer, the defense lawyers, et cetera, we were trying to get a trigger in there that would essentially ameliorate any of the concerns that there were out there, that we weren't, that we were just getting the guys that are doing the most damage through the distribution chain. We're looking for the big guys on this one, the guys that are distributing a larger amount. And as you can see in the bill also, the other triggers have to do with what normally you look for, what normally law enforcement looks for, and that is that somebody, while they're doing the distributing of the substance, has a firearm, that they have a certain amount of cash, that they're doing cash transactions, that they have bulk materials used in packaging methamphetamine, so again, dealers, that the materials used to manufacture methamphetamine, including receipts, chemicals, laboratory equipment, lighting, ventilating, and power generating equipment, or drug transaction records and lists. So what we're really looking for here, I want to make sure that we understand the difference between possession of methamphetamine and what we're doing here with, we're looking up the chain here. We're looking for the guys that are distributing more than 5 grams and are in the business of poisoning our people and our kids.
Senator Nessebar, you would have the floor if you chose.
I'm just going to ask my question one more time. What weighs 5 grams? I'm trying to get a sense of how much 5 grams worth of meth looks like.
Senator Russell, might you have any idea?
Well, not to make you ask me 3 or 4 times, like I did earlier today. It's not to obfuscate. The 5 grams, it was in order to placate or in order to alleviate some of the concerns that we had in the committee. And what I would suggest to you is probably on your machine in front of you, Google, if you've got a question about what weighs 5 grams, I would refer you to that, because that's in fact what I would have to do. And I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm just saying that might be the easiest way for you to find that out.
I would note, in an attempt to not show favoritism, there are other search engines like Bing or Yahoo or what have you. Senator Nessebar.
Mr. President, I think I'm going to yield to the good senator behind me. Maybe he can ask the question in a way that is clearer.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think I can answer the question, and I also want to clear up something, because there were comments that were just made about this 5 grams being a response to a specific request from some unnamed leader of the Democrats. And I know exactly who that was directed at, and I just want to make it clear that 5 grams did not come from me, did not come from the defense lawyers. It came solely from the author of this amendment. Now, so the body understands what 5 grams is. A nickel weighs 5 grams. So if you're talking about major league distributors, you're talking about people who distribute a nickel's worth of weight. That's what 5 grams is.
Senator Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. President. 5 grams, a sheet of paper weighs 5 grams. So if you fold it in half and half and half and half, that's quite a bit. It's enough to knock a horse over or really cause some damage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Youngberg.
Thank you, sir.
Hold on one second. Senator Nelson, I don't believe you've spoken on this issue yet. You'll have the floor before Senator Youngberg speaks a second time.
I'll keep it short. I know folks want to get home. Folks, it takes a pinprick of ricin to kill someone. So when we start talking about how much something weighs in atomic weight, it doesn't make a difference. There's gases that weigh almost nothing that can kill you. Ricin, a small, tiny, on the tip of a pin is enough to kill you. This stuff is poison. This stuff is killing our kids. We talk about every day about the meth epidemic. And this is not a meth epidemic that's new. I was dealing with this stuff as a young cop in 1986 in California. So let's not play games and make it sound like 5 grams is nothing. It may mean the difference between life and death to some young South Dakotan. Thank you.
Does any member care to speak before Senator Youngberg speaks a second time? Senator Youngberg, you have the floor.
For sure this time. Thank you, Mr. President. So the study over the summer, I guess to put in retrospect, and I don't want to pound home the 5-gram thing, but 5 grams of methamphetamine could get every single sitting member in this body high 2 or 1, if not 2 times. So that's a lot. It's a lot of meth use. So that's what I got from when we had this summer study. I contacted recovering meth addicts to ask these questions because I don't know this stuff. On this bill, I think it's getting away. The point of it's getting away is this isn't to punish anybody or get anybody in trouble that is a user. That's not. But one of the questions, the way you ask, is how to get rid of something. Well, if we get rid of the electrical generation in North Dakota, it's going to be really hard for us to get electricity, or at least a little bit harder. And that's what I compare this to. You take out the kingpins, everything else should dwindle down. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Any further remarks? Does any member care to speak before Senator Russell gives his close? Senator Russell, you have the floor.
I thank you. And again, I go back to the statistics, the first one being the 669 arrests in 2012, and then the 3,179 arrests in 2014, or our most recent year. I can't read this graph very well, but I can read the 3,179 in the most recent year. The other thing that I was remiss in not mentioning that I think that we need to be contemplating as we vote on this, and that is the idea that the decisions that we make here, a lot of times we don't think of them in a life and death type of situation. And I want to give you one more statistic before I close, and that is in 2013 we had 32 deaths related to methamphetamine, and in the most recent year that we have the statistics for, in 2016 the number of deaths had jumped to 51. We've reached epidemic proportions. We need to take it seriously, and I ask that you give serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final consideration of Senate Bill 63 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no, and the Secretary will call the roll.
Senator Boland? Aye. Kamak?
Aye.
Cronin? No. Kurd? Aye. Ewing, excuse. Frerichs? No. Greenfield? Aye. Haverly? No. Heinert? Aye. Jensen Kennedy? No. Klum? Aye. Colbeck? No. Maher? Aye. Monroe? Aye. Nelson?
Aye.
Nesseba?
No.
Netherton? Aye. Norstrup? Aye. Otten? Aye. Partridge? No. Peters? No. Russell? Aye. Solano? Aye. Stalzer? Aye. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Heinert. And Sutton. Mr. President, there are 20 yeas, 9 nays, and 6 excused.
So the motion, having received a majority vote to the members elect, is declared passed. Questions on its title? Hearing none, the title is deemed correct. We'll be moving on to Order of Business 15, announcements. I would like to share that I've received a text and also heard from one of the members who's received a call. Roads are bad either way you go. Visibility is poor in spots. Be very careful on the roads. Those who have traveled west have chosen in some cases to turn around and come back. And I don't want to belabor this because of what I just said, but I've had a pleasure the last few days presiding, and I would note that last week my grandparents called me and they complimented me on the job I did last week. They're 95 and 93 years old. I know they're watching or will be watching a tape-delayed version of this, so I just wanted to tell them thank you for all your support over the years. I wish you folks well in your travels, and thank you for the opportunity. Are there any announcements? Senator Kamak.
Senate Ag will meet on Tuesday, and we'll hear several bills at 10 o'clock.
Senator Wick.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Joint Committee on Appropriations will meet at 10:30 Tuesday morning.
Senator Bolin.
Senate Ed, 7:45 on Tuesday, 3 bills up. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Senator Nelson.
Yes, it is. Senate Commerce and Energy, room 423, full docket, 10 a.m. Tuesday. Thanks, sir.
Senator Nelson, did you care to speak to the commemoration at all before we adjourn? Commemoration at the bottom of today's calendar.
Yes, sir. Just real quick, sir, I know the folks are leaving. On behalf of South Dakota, we mourn with the family, and it's our honor to commemorate and remember that fine individual.
Thank you,
May
sir.
you rest in peace. Thank you, sir.
Any further announcements? There being no further announcements, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Boots.
Senator Colbeck moves that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. We are adjourned.